start the discussion with this, ma'am. I had a poll on Instagram, which, okay, I'll be honest, did not have a lot of reach, but I asked a very direct question. Do you believe TV news is credible anymore? And to my surprise, not even a single one said yes. 60% said no. And the remaining 40% said, depends on the news channel. Which was very surprising for me since I wanted to see at least one say yes, right? What is your viewpoint on the same? What are the primary factors that people this age don't believe in TV news anymore?
So thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be interviewed by you, Chehneet. It's always great to see young, bright people, so thank you for interviewing me today. I think, one, I'm not here to write the obituary of TV news. I'm always an optimist, but now that I'm no longer an active participant, I guess I'm more an observer of television. And I think that there are things, of course, that television can do to reinvent itself. I think we now have to, we always talk about how the Prime Minister is a master of reinvention. It's, as someone said, that when the opposition is attacking PM Modi 1.0 when he's reached 3.0. So I think television news also has to now re-evolve and look at what can the new avatar of television be. And in fact, in a sense, the word television news itself is a misnomer, because you will find that there is no company today which is just television. It will be journalism across platforms, whether that's your phone, whether that's your computer, or whether that's a television screen, is now increasingly irrelevant. So in that sense, I think the word television news will also soon be passé. I think what's important for news and journalism today is something which we may have lost out in the fast-paced world in other areas as well, is authenticity. I think you have to be authentic, and I think if you're not authentic, viewers are very quick to sense that, and that will play out. So I think the authenticity and the credibility are key issues, and that is really stuff that no amount of marketing budgets or advertising budgets can buy. So I think that often we do find that strategies evolve around what will look good or what will get the most clicks or the most likes, but that is not something which you can predict or you can do it as part of a marketing strategy. It has to be done as part of a strong editorial backing and must have the content to be able to justify that. I think one of the other big issues is that I think India is such a huge country, and I think with this, and we can talk about this separately, but I think with the revenue models of television networks in the last decade, somehow we are not telling or reflecting the stories of that country of 1.4 crore people, or 1.4 billion people, 140 crore people, in a way which is representative. And I think that is what, I mean, if we look at recent state elections, I always find it extremely odd that how even journalists can't sense the way the wind is blowing. So you'll have opinion polls, you'll have analysts, you'll have people all saying very confidently that this party will win. And then when the results come, a completely different party has won, which has not been reflected anywhere on the television analysis or reports. And then the same people will say, oh, this is why it happened. So I think if we did have that connect, you would not find increasingly this kind of almost dysfunctional analysis of events when the reality is so different from what is being projected. So I think that is a really important point. Authenticity and building your connect back with the people whose stories you're telling. Those are key.
Very well said. I think I have a headline already which says marketing budgets can't buy trust. So very well said about that. My next question is, you know, we are in an era of TV news where we have heard people say, "Chain se sona hai to jaag jaiye," "Sansani khabar," "Nation wants to know." These are the taglines we know TV news and their anchors by. We have sort of blurred the lines between entertainment and information. It has become infotainment. What is this? How does this impact the trust factor on news TV, according to you?
So when I had a daily show, my tagline was, "You don't have to shout to be heard." Now, I don't know if that necessarily stands true, because sometimes it is the loudest person, but there's also a saying that empty barrels make the most noise. But I think what is important, and I think we should be careful, that boring doesn't mean credible. So we also have to reinvent in a sense that you are talking the new language which people are talking. And I think you have to be very much in sync with that. You have to, as I said, you're telling stories. What is the best way to tell stories? It's not by boring people with information and just facts and without having the human face to it. I think always in any story, it has to be that, why are you telling the story? Who does it impact? I think that is the main reason of journalism, that what does it change? And I think if you're basically just repeating the same thing that everyone knows, it doesn't really break new ground. I think that's really important. And I think especially for young people today, I think whether it's Instagram, whether it's on X or others, they don't mind where they consume media from or journalism from. So I think in that sense, that television barrier will have to be broken, because if they're watching a debate show which may have originated from television on X or anywhere else, how does it matter?
That was exactly my next question. Thank you for coming to that. As much as TV news is losing its credibility, utna hi it's being very well impacted on YouTube and other social media channels for us to consume the news. But on the flip side, PIB recently blocked around 9 to 10 YouTube channels for fake news as well. So what is the whole scenario here? How does the lack of credibility on TV news impact consumption of news on other mediums of channels?
So I wouldn't agree with lack of credibility of TV news channels. In fact, I would be much more nuanced on that. I would say that news channels, and again, I won't use the word TV, but news networks are still the most credible source of news. Of course, in that there will be glitches, or there will still be some areas which I may not agree with. And I think debates are perhaps more culpable for that than actual news. So I think still for news, it has to be a credible source. And I think the credible source are still your news organizations, whether it's NDTV, whether it's India Today, whether it's the Indian Express, it will be news organizations. Now, you may access that news on a different platform than television, but news organizations are still definitely the most credible source. I think individual journalists are, of course, interesting to watch on YouTube, but often they're not necessarily news sources as much as news analysis, and through their prism. So I think that's a very different genre completely. It's an interesting genre, but it's a completely different genre from the news organization networks. And I think we've seen that many, many mistakes have happened when it's actually come from non-news sources. And mistakes, and especially in India, where you can have often communal clashes or other issues, or a person's life destroyed or jobs lost because of something that just comes up as a social media rumor. I think we need to be very, very careful. And I think you will find that the credible news organizations, that they, of course, everyone makes mistakes, but the level of mistakes or errors will be much, much lower than any kind of YouTube channel.
You've been in the industry for too long now, more than 3 decades. According to you, have you ever come across such an...
Is too long meaning the time to leave?
No, not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
Always relevant, always young.
Thank you.
My point is, you must have come across mistakes in your team, by yourself as well, where you felt like you have compromised on the quality of news. It may have happened sometime or the other that you came across something like that. How did you try to rectify that? How did you try to regain the trust of the viewer after that?
See, I think everyone makes honest mistakes, or mistakes that, I mean, especially that when we began, as I said, when NDTV began doing news, it was the first independent news channel. We were the first Indian channel to actually do breaking news in that sense. And I think there were mistakes we made. I think there were genuine mistakes. I think for sure, when I look back, that the terror attack in Mumbai, we would definitely not have covered us and other news channels in the way we did. And in fact, after that, guidelines came out. At that time, I was a member of the News Broadcasting Standards Authority headed by Justice Verma. Completely new standards came out to make sure that Indian television would never cover terror attacks like that again, that we would not cover it live, it would be deferred, there would be absolutely, there would be no kind of unverified interviews done by people who didn't have knowledge, and the first focus was that no harm should be done. And I think at that point, because of live news, nobody realized that broadcasting live, the implications it could have, including the officials, the government authorities who were briefing. I think now government authorities have also learned, and news organizations have learned that as well. We saw it when when Captain Abhinandan, the Indian pilot who crash landed in Pakistan, all news organizations came together to make sure that none of the photographs of him in Pakistani territory, which could have been disturbing, were actually broadcast by us. Social media did it, but no news channel did it. So I think we have learned over the years. We are much, much better than we were, especially guidelines again recently against hate speech, both against politicians, of course, by the Election Commission, but against news channels are something that are self-imposed. So I think those are all very important factors which people don't often give credit to news organizations for.
Right. Again, coming back to basics, I generally like to come back to point square one when we go too far in the discussion. How does this discussion matter in the real world out there?
No, I think it matters a lot. I think it matters a lot because I find that increasingly people go into echo chambers. You know, they will want to watch a journalist who reflects their views, and they will believe that what he or she says is absolute gospel truth. They'll want to watch a news channel which they believe is on their side. I think that is something which again is a cause of introspection and self-correction, that if a news channel is seen to be on someone's side, then it's not doing its job. So I think that is something which all television, all journalists need to be very careful of. So I think the biggest self-correction really is to make sure that every story has multiple sides, and the news needs to make sure that they're reflecting accurately all the multiple sides and complexities of a story. So I think that is very important, and especially in election season, I think it's crucial for the credibility or trust of any news organization.
Which was also my next part of the question. We are coming up with general elections. Everybody is braced up for that. How do you think that news channels can this time make sure that there is the least possible credibility issue when it comes to the coverage?
I think a level playing field. I think as in whether it's sports or news, I think a level playing field has to be given. The Election Commission, of course, will ensure that for elections, but I think for television as well. And I am a big votary for the fact that I think India needs a media commission. And I've said this before, the revenue model is broken. Half the reason is because if you have the pressure, or newsroom has the pressure, the management has the pressure, that you have to also be looking at what your ratings are, what your likes are, what your clicks are. You have to have a media commission model which can function in a way like the BBC, but the BBC, of course, is only one channel. But here we have to do it where there is taxpayer funded in terms of a subscription model which goes across television networks and is then run, in a sense, through that media commission. The TV networks, of course, can be private management, but there would be national channels, there would be regional channels, and we need to look at a media commission for India now, not, of course, in time for these elections, but I think in the years to come, we'll find that this is something that's definitely needed because of the influence and impact that media has.
I think this media discussion topic can go for another 1 hour. We can have a separate panel discussion on the same. But I think we only have last 2.5 minutes left. I would like to wrap this up and open the stage for audience after that. How do you envision the future of TV news as to coming back to the state where the trust is blind with the viewers and the audience?
Firstly, I don't think any trust should be blind. I think that's the biggest challenge to credibility and trust, is when that somebody believes in you blindly. You have to, I mean, just as we question politicians or government authorities, in that way we should be open to being questioned as well by our viewers. And I think that, as I've made that point, that I think authenticity, credibility and connect are the key areas where the media has to build up and talk, as I said, tell news stories. Because I think the problem still is, and this is not just India but global, we've seen that Elon Musk on X has made the point on how mainstream media, the viewers are collapsing. And the recent Oxford Reuters survey made the same point, that people aren't watching television because they feel it's only about bad news. I think we need to be reflecting the news stories of a new generation and of a changing India and also of a changing world.
I think, yeah, that's a good ending.